All right, we're broadcasting and folks will start signing on, and that usually takes several minutes, but excited to be here. It is Wednesday, October 6th. The digital roundtable is on, and I see already the attendee list jumping off the charts. Welcome, everybody.
How you doing?
We have a great guest speaker today. I'm sure you're delighted to see how we're gonna chat about everything. Our own King, Llewelyn King, happens to be in Greece. We're gonna hear about that in a moment. But before we get rolling here, our own Dr. John Sibley Butler will get us in the mood with some.
I'm standing here in my office at the great University of Texas. We get us a song going for our guests. Goodbye to Texas University. So long to the orange and white. And it's good luck to the dear old Texas Aggies. We are the ones who show the real old fight. The eyes of Texas are up on you. That is the song they sing so well. Sounds like hell. Good luck to Texas University. Da 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 da.
Awesome. Way to start, Johnny. Where to start? John, how are you there? How is it going? Are you on campus? Where are you today?
I am on campus. I just had a great class and I had my mask on. Things are very, very interesting in the news. It's very, very interesting around the world, and including Taiwan and China. And as we think about things, the topic in class today was what is the world looking like from an economic point of view and the opportunity structure. But it's a lot of good stuff going on as the world reinvents itself, and the world has been a mess for a long time. Of course, the virus is still there. So it's good to be, it's a wonderful day. I played golf last night at about 6 o'clock, and I thought it was November the 31st. It felt so good in Austin, Texas. So I'm doing good.
Excellent, excellent. Llewelyn King, well, how are you, sir?
I'm quite fabulous. I was on my way to East Texas and I got lost and I ended up in Crete. Well, you're always telling me to go to East Texas. I thought I might go there, and that's where the pot of gold is.
How is the weather in Crete, and how is the food?
The food is fabulous. It has a really unique cuisine in it. It's Greek but different. It's almost more Turkish in some ways, but it's a blending of all of these Mediterranean cuisines. And of course, it has a great history. And the weather is fabulous. It's beautiful. It's great for walking, for doing almost everything. A little cool for swimming, but not too cool, depending on your fortitude. However, underneath all this is a mighty European and, for that matter, global energy crisis building. The price of natural gas, according to Bloomberg, has gone up 500%. The Greeks are expecting to have a very bad winter, I beg your pardon, because of extreme shortage. It's a bit underreported in the States, although I did see that New York Times finally got around to finding out about it, that there is chaos in the world liquefied natural gas markets and the pipeline markets, and it's affecting every country from Brazil to Eastern Europe and here to Mediterranean Europe. It is also affecting China and India. The cause of this is almost a perfect storm. A lack of supply from Russia into Europe, a run up in the liquefied natural gas, and a huge wind drought of about 6 weeks that struck Europe. And there's a lesson in this. I keep telling you about the Kariba Dam, which is between Zimbabwe and Zambia. And when that was built, I was there in 1958. Today, by the way, is my birthday. You know that.
Oh, God.
I don't want your congratulations. Just send fat checks. But anyway, that was built, and those countries believed that they had electricity for all time because the Zambezi is such a powerful river, but there's been 5 years of drought. Britain in particular, which is 20% dependent on wind energy, thought they had it licked, no worries, and suddenly they had in the North Sea, which talks about gales as a standard state of affairs, there were no gales, no wind. It's catastrophic. It's going to have a massive impact in pushing up the cost of goods and services, i.e. inflation. This is going to be a very strange winter. And you didn't hear about it here first, but you heard about it here quite early. I mentioned it several weeks ago.
Yep.
And it's getting worse. And the man of the moment, Pat, is Vladimir Putin, because he controls the gas supply into Europe. They need more LNG, they need more gas, and they haven't got it, and they're not going to get it in time for this winter. It's a very grim situation and will affect us. Not that we'll be short of gas, but that the cost of things will go up. We already have inflation, incipient inflation, because of various factors, including government spending per chance, but now you're going to have it for real. The cost of energy. We saw it back in the 70s and 80s. When energy goes up, inflation goes up, and everything gets fairly chaotic. Welcome to the energy crisis Mark II.
All right. Well, that's a great insight. I appreciate that. Pat Wood, how are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
I didn't ever think I'd start the show with Mr. Butler singing my Aggie war hymn from the hallowed grounds of the University of Texas. That's a pretty damn good way to start a show. Despite Llewelyn's cold water bath on top of that, we got to find we're digging through that cow manure and trying to find that shiny little piece of something. We'll find it.
So before we get rolling here, let me introduce you formally for those that somehow have been living under a rock and don't know who you are. Pat Wood III is the CEO of Hunt Energy Network, and he can tell us more about it. But Hunt Energy Network is an affiliate of the Hunt Consolidated Inc., which is part of the Hunt family companies, and they are trying to become this next generation energy company. I'll let Pat walk us through a little bit of that and some of the cool things that they're doing. Pat is also the principal at Wood 3 Resources and on the board of SunPower Corporation and Quanta Services. And he is the former chairman of Dynegy and former chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and former chairman of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Pat is a JD graduate from Harvard Law School and also has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Texas A&M. Whoop, whoop. All right. Welcome, Pat. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Andres. Good to see you. I had the good fortune to see you in person as well as Mr. King.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago down in Central Texas at a great conference y'all were having down there. So thank you for roping me in to visit a little bit longer. Because
absolutely. And clearly, Pat, we review here digital transformations and where the economy is going, and we're very focused on smart energy and smart cities, smart buildings, and all the stuff that is going on around that. But you've heard from the guys a little bit of where things are. I'm curious, you have a unique perspective, from your long tenure, but also right now from an exciting point of view of what the Hunt Energy Network is trying to do. Tell us a little bit of how you see the economy, the recovery, the COVID impact. How is the business that Hunt Energy Network is in? What are you all doing? How do you see what's the forecast look like for you for 2022?
So he shoots the fire hose at you folks, and you drink as much as you can. So, gosh, I wasn't writing that down fast enough. So the economy, my world is right now Texas, because that's where I'm doing professional and SunPower's course in California. And we are part of the United States, so we care about that, and we're part of the world, so we care about that. But I would, last year was such a hard hit, I think, for all of us. I was with a group over the weekend, and we were just trying to remember what life was like before March 15th of 2020. And we missed a few things, but the downturn was significant. I mean, I'm here in the Dallas office today, and I was on the phone that week with Hunter Hunt the day that oil went to negative $37 a barrel, which, inside an oil company, that's not a really nice story to tell, but it was pretty dramatic. So needless to say, the world has readjusted and climb back out of that valley pretty fast. It was about like a boomerang. It was really far down and really back up. But I recently had the opportunity to visit with the retiring CEO of Southwest Airlines, who I got to say it online. I mean, that's still the role model company for customer service in my mind. And so that man's been there. Gary Kelly's been there for 18 years and was a great guy to talk to. But he just said, look, some things may never change back. He's a business travel from, just again, thinking about from his business travel. In another day and time, the four of us would have all flown to probably Llewelyn's house in DC to do this, or flown down to Austin to do this. But now that this is so much more accessible and available and people can communicate. I mean, my workplace, I think, I ask other CEOs about this too. What do you think your work rhythm will be after, say, Christmas of this year, after a year and a half more than a year and a half of all this? I haven't seen one yet that says we're going back to 5 days in the office. So you think about the changes that's going to do. For me, in the power business, power needs probably are going to change within a day. I don't think the aggregate number of power, I think that's actually, we've kind of been at a lull for about a decade as we've changed all these light bulbs to LEDs and been pretty conservative about how we put efficiency in the office buildings and the homes. And we have obviously, as we learned in Texas in February, got a hell of a lot more to do in that regard with regard to insulation for cold. But that and the national level has kind of kept the load growth pretty stagnant. Most of my career it was going up a couple, 2, 3, 4%, depending on which state per year, but everybody was increasing. Then energy efficiency kicked in and in good ways that made our economy much more conservative about how we use energy. But a lot of those are one-time gains. They last forever, but that resets your baseline for a little while. And then now when you start adding cars to the mix, I mean, that's just going to be a complete game changer. So, when I think about what do I want to do for the rest of my life, I want to stay ahead of that curve and make sure that we've got a resilient, reliable system that works for my kids and my grandkids and all y'all. It makes our state and our country and our world a better off place. And we're just going to have to, and I think we all want to do that from, the minute we graduate from college and start worrying about something other than drinking beer and chasing girls, as we kind of decide, hey, I got to make the world a better place before I'm done here. So how can I do that? My thought, I've always been interested in those issues that are kind of right over the hill. The one that seems to be right over the hill right now is energy storage. I enjoyed my last decade and a half developing wind and solar, operating gas and coal plants. I never got to do much on nuclear, but that's all right. But I haven't learned enough about geothermal either. I'd like to think that would be part of the mix at the end of the century. I think both nuclear and geothermal do come back into the mix by the end of this century, along with probably some version of hydrogen. But I know for sure that storage and demand response are dramatically underutilized technologies that it's time for. We need them. We've had them and we've had them in every other commodity industry. The ability of people to respond to price, as I think Llewelyn, you indicated, they're going to have to do in Europe. They're going to have to get more conservative as prices go up. People do reallocate their supply so that they can save their money. We've had it nice here in Texas. We got it. You know, the nice thing about what we did 25 years ago was competition works. And what it worked to do was drop that price way down, maybe too much. I think we're having that debate in the state right now for our out-of-state listeners, but we're, you know, trying to figure out, we did great on decarbonization. We did great on clean. We did great on cheap, but we didn't do great on reliable. And you need all three for the power system to work. So will storage solve all that? No. I think there are a lot of other fixes that our capable new public servants on the PUC are going to be looking at and embracing pretty soon. They're moving in a pretty aggressive pace, which I like, because I think we all need the investment certainty. But I'd like to think that batteries and demand response, interconnections of Texas to the outside world, which I know is always the third rail of politics to talk about in this industry, but there's easy ways to do that don't change what we've got. That's really good. So anyway, I like being in the middle of all that. As you all know, I haven't known John as long, but I've known Llewelyn a long time, and Andres for a little bit shorter time. But I, you know, like you guys, I like to be right in the middle of the fight. And it's sometimes you get beat up and sometimes you get through it okay, but I'll get a little bit of both, I expect, going forward.
Yeah, Pat, let me ask you this. You mentioned some great entrepreneurs, because I knew Herb Kelleher, and Gary was in my class, by the way, in the, in the 70s in the Longhorns. And, you know, let's talk about the business models. You know, I'm coming up to Dallas. We have a little game up there, but I'm taking Von Lang. I'm not flying. I'm taking Von Lang. And you mentioned storage, and we know that we have talked on this show about how Tesla is really becoming an energy company rather than an automobile company. And we know that storage will be great. We got a little behind in the renewables under the Obama administration, because all the money moved to, you know, the East Coast and to California. My question is, when we look at reliable, and when you look at your space for the next 10 years, and you look at how storage is becoming big, you look at what automobiles would be, how do you see, first of all, the energy space in America? And what do you think it'd be like totally for job opportunities as we reinvent ourselves, or continue to reinvent ourselves along these energies?
You know, John, it is first time in my career that I've been the oldest guy in the office. So I've got 3 on camera interviews with people we're hiring today, and it is so fun to see. And again, one of them was a guy that graduated from high school the same year I did. So he and I are going to have to arm wrestle for who's going to be the oldest guy at the end. But people like energy. I think the kids coming out of college, they can't get enough. Now they all want to do clean and green. And the nice thing about storage is it's kind of whatever people want it to be. I mean, you know, we're storing power on the grid. A lot of it's renewable, but there's coal power and there's gas power. But, you know, I'm an all of the above guy, so I don't really get too wrapped up in the color. I kind of like the fact it works. So you know, but people like the new technologies. And so I think the employment thing is going to be fun, because people, for the first time in my career, well, A&M was a little bit of an exceptional place, because people actually like to think about drilling for oil, and they like to think about building a gas pipeline. And so that, I mean, that's maybe a little bit a one-off kind of venue to look for my frame of reference. But, you know, now people understand energy issues, and the downside is people died in Texas. That's an awful downside. But the upside is people appreciate their electricity and care a lot more about it, and are asking a lot more questions about it than they ever have before. And inevitably that leads to dinner table conversations, which leads to mom and dad talking about, you know, energy in front of Johnny and Susie, and they kind of grow up and think, you know, maybe I need to think about that as a career. The career path issues in energy, I think, are surprisingly for me, it just took a turn about 15 years ago. About the time I was leaving FERC, energy actually became interesting again. And I think it probably was driven a lot by renewables, but the climate change issues stepped up to the max. People have to understand, those emissions from a coal plant do have an impact. So we got to do something about them, not necessarily close the plant down, but we got to figure out how to clean it up with good science and good technology. Same with natural gas, which doesn't pollute near as much, but also has some issues. So those conversations just weren't interesting to kids back when I went to college. I mean, people say, "Oh, you're going to go work for more from." Okay, you're going to go work in energy. Okay, well, they weren't the guys that got the cute girls to go dance with them on the floor. It was the guys flying off to the military or going off to work on a ranch or got the Wall Street job as an investment banker. But us guys going into the energy industry were just kind of dishwater boring. But
you're exactly right. We've talked about on this that nobody knew what ERCOT was.
Well,
the only thing we knew that when we turned it on, the lights came on. So for the first time, we've talked about this, Llewelyn, that energy came front and center in the political arena. I mean, politicians were actually discussing not just the price of oil, but what happens when you turn your lights on and they go off. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of creativity, a lot of in this area. I see a lot of at my Texas Venture Labs here at the University of Texas, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's time. The world needs it. The world needs the best and brightest because, and I'm speaking to y'all. Y'all have taught me in my career, the three of y'all, but what's more foundational to our way of life than electricity? And not just energy, but really of all the energies, electricity now has stepped up.
Yep.
It's, gasoline's going to be a part of my life probably for a while, but my grandchildren, maybe not so much. I'm not sure what's going to be powering Herb Kelleher's jets anymore. I mean, they're looking at different technology, different, non-hydrocarbon perhaps, or non-petrochemical, I think, solutions. Marine, I always think marine and aviation are the hardest of the transportations to get converted to something that's a little more low carbon, but I think everything else is free game. But that, those things are so that they're important, but electricity now is going to become so pervasive that it really bids up the heat. We can't really afford ever as a nation to have what happened in Texas in February happen again, because we're going to be even more dependent on the electric grid. It's got to be much more redundant, much more resilient, and much more reliable than it's ever been before, because we got so much at stake. Not just the hospitals and the jails and the things that are required to be critical facilities now, but everything's going to be critical. And I'm a little worried about that, because I just know that human nature is what it is, but it's where we're going. So
we like to say everybody's moving to Texas and nobody's bringing their own electricity.
They can bring
Pat,
one. Yes, sir.
Pat, I salute you for being in storage. As usual, you're front of the pack, because storage is the big issue. Storage is terribly important. Seems to me the big issues are storage and digitization. EPRI thinks that you can wring more power out of existing facilities with simply better digital management, including, believe it or not, hydro. However, I think we're in a very critical moment, because the passion for renewables, and I'm for them, but the passion for renewables is so political, so intense, if you will, so woke, that we're in danger of destabilizing the grid by going wholeheartedly for things. I mentioned earlier that hydro dries up. We saw it in the West. We've seen the wind drop in Europe. We've seen the wind drop elsewhere. That if we have too much reliance on these morally attractive ways of generating electricity, we will destabilize the grid, and we will get, in fact, what is happening in Britain today, when they went whole hog for wind did not build their new nuclear fast enough. And for reasons that must be political, they never put in any substantial gas storage. And gas is a storage medium because you can have it on site like a coal pile. And yet there's such a feeling against gas that I fear that we're in a position of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as it were, by going whole hog for particularly wind. We know the parameters of solar better. We know when the sun shines with some certainty, not absolute certainty, but we don't know when the wind will blow or when changing wind patterns. We can look just for the way the jet stream moves up and down the country, and it affects all other winds. We need, as we always used to say, all of the above, balanced portfolio. You remember those words?
Yes,
They probably came out of your mouth, Pat, many times when you were at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as its chairman. So we've got that. We've seen the situation that's happening with liquefied natural gas, where prices are going up from one end of the world to the other, from Brazil to India. China is possibly cutting electric supply to some of its industries. And in an incredible piece of unfortunate happenstance, there may be electric shortages during the COP26 huge environmental meeting in Glasgow. The Brits are working like hell to keep the electricity on there because there'll be a terrible black eye for renewables if the electric. Now, I don't think renewables should be blamed. I think they simply should be kept in check so that they are balanced with storage, and possibly treat gas going forward as a kind of spinning reserve. Some of us have been around a long time, remember spinning reserve,
Yep.
coal plants that kept running without making any, just in case you needed them. I think to look at natural gas as being an exhausted fuel, having no use in the future, is quite wrong. I think we need to clean up the methane leaks, which are a lot more serious than the carbon dioxide coming out of the gas, and use gas to back up these other sources because they are variable. And we've seen what can happen when the rivers don't flow, when the wind doesn't blow, and even when the sun doesn't shine. You need defense in depth here. And one of the defenses we have is our old and trusted fossil fuels, but especially gas, which is so versatile, which can come online so fast. You can bring a gas turbine up to speed almost in moments, which you can't with any other form of generation. You can't do it to a nuclear power plant, for example. I also think we need to look to the future of nuclear and to get over some of the hang-ups about it. You know, if people don't want nuclear, then they should get rid of the nuclear navy, nuclear weapons, because they're all contributing to so-called nuclear waste. I personally feel that science will find solutions to everything it creates, so long as we don't stop it before fruition, so long as we don't start interfering. We have been building nuclear power plants that were worldwide, that were state-of-the-art in 1960. In the 21st century, at least we're over that now. We're looking at small modular reactors and at other ways, other kinds of reactors like thorium, molten salt, etc. So it is technologically, you're so right, Pat, a very, very exciting time. Storage first, new generation second, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you may need the little blighter.
Let me chime in here, Pat, and get your thoughts on a few things that I think top of mind for those listening and what's going on. So kudos again for your service as a civil servant. And I would say that the revolution started with your competition drive in Texas and then at FERC. And thank you again for all that seminal work that was paramount. Let's fast forward to where you're looking at, and obviously ERCA, this does not fall into the FERC purview for obvious design reasons and non DC ties and things like that. But order FERC order 841, right? It's all about bringing DG into the mix, and order 2222. It's all about creating a new entity, an aggregator that can aggregate anything on the retail side, on the meter side, on the customer side, on DG, and play in the wholesale level. And it seems to me, Pat, a lot of people had speculated for years that this is the moment when maybe a company like the Hunt Energy Network becomes a national aggregator, or maybe it's Google and Amazon, and maybe there are new players that emerge, all the car companies, because they want to manage their batteries and play with their batteries in the ISOs and the RTOs. Walk us a little bit through, how do you see this playing out? What's going to happen here? Because I think there is so much money sitting on the sidelines, and the opportunity is gigantic.
It is, Andres, you nailed it. And I heard some good conversations in this regard at your conference, but the space I want to be in. So the answer I'll give you is what I'm spending probably the rest of my life on is that. I want to be the service provider out there, and I'm starting with batteries, but I'm not stopping with batteries. Batteries is my anchor, because I learned from the Enron experience that if you want to be out there doing trading and kind of new markets, you better have your hard assets in place, not give them away to Rich Kinder, but hold on to them and trade off of that. So that's where we're starting. We're putting, just for the benefit of your audience, we're putting 10 right now. Our first wave on the beach is 10 megawatt plants, about 50 batteries. That's what our funding plan is, to put 50 batteries around the ERCOT grid at substations. We buy land. That's a beautiful part about being in an oil company is your landmen. They know how to work every landowner, county records office, courthouse. We're getting land where we think the grid needs the support. Developing those relationships even deeper with our friends at the regulated utility businesses. A few of them were a little skeptical at first. I mean, again, we're kind of version 1.0. I see one of my colleagues, Danny Musher, online. There's a few of us out here who at other companies as well as him are out there trying to kind of crack the code on how to work with the utilities here. But between us, the utilities they've been told by the legislature, you're not getting in storage, so go help the people who are, do it right, which is kind of what we did with generation 25 years ago, is tell the utilities, y'all aren't doing generation anymore. You're just going to do wires, and we want to do wires great and treat everybody like, the Queen of England. Great. So we're breaking into that world now with the distribution utilities, which actually tend to be different parts of the world than the transmission utilities, but that's how they straighten them up. But anyway, that's where I want to start. But I'm standing on the substation looking toward the customer meter, not back toward ERCOT and the central grid, because the central grid has been great. That's where I built my regulatory career, was making sure those all work well. And they've been reasonably well. I mean, nobody gets a perfect day in that regard, but the central grid let us down in February. So I don't want to have to just fix everything and wait till it breaks again, because it's inevitable. I mean, the 1 in 10 year standard was right on time. 2011, we had an outage in Texas. 10 years and 14 days later, we had another outage in Texas. It was right on design timeline, but it was a dramatic, because of a number of things, it was mishandled, but it really had a dramatic impact that was way disproportionate to what anybody like we ever would dream that it should have been. So anyway, I want to be that system. I want to be that solution at the edge, both the physical edge and the metaphorical edge of the grid, so that the robustness and the resilience comes from the bottom up, the democratized, I call it the decentralization, decarbonization, democratization. That's what we want to do, is that last piece, is really bring in those resources that have been left out in the cold, who've been discriminated against for all these years, just like wind and solar were wind really.
Yep.
Solar wasn't around when I was at the PUC, but wind was kind of treated like the redheaded stepchild. We said, come on in. You got a seat at the table. Judy Walsh and I were just read the Riot Act to the old incumbents and said, let your people free. We want all these people here. They're all playing. You can't pick on those guys or we're gonna punch you in the face. And so Wynn had a seat at the table. They worked through their last 30 years. I think they probably earned the A. They came in and really took advantage of the opportunities of the free market to come into Texas in a great way. So I value them. Llewelyn, I'd have to wake up real early in the morning to ever find anything I've disagreed with you on. And what you just said a minute ago is absolutely true. We need all of the above and we need some new stuff. And the new stuff is hopefully storage and then a really robust response from demand. Because up to now, it's been centrally driven, totally supply driven. You get a bill 30 days after the fact. You had no idea what the price signal was, and you still don't because you get an average rate that's averaged over the year. I love to look at the real-time market as I do on the iPad and just see what's going on price-wise because you just learn a lot.
Well, Pat,
Real quick,
let's expand on that. You need to get up a little later to disagree with Llewelyn. I can teach you how to do that. You're getting up too early. But let me ask you this. We have said here, we're working on a project here with Texas State University on the grid. And we have maintained that to automate the grid, that the technology, all the technology is there. And we have maintained that the grid edge needs to be automated. We have maintained that the grid edge is now where computers were 50 years ago. And we've maintained that the load is still done by hand rather than automation. Llewelyn is quick to bring up the fact that all of this can be hacked when the whole grid is smart.
Yeah.
I think that, and I want you to comment on this. I think that we have a public-private relationship here in terms of energy. And we know that the technology exists. If we look at all of the grid programs in Washington, D.C., we do research after research after research and set the research on the shelf. Because the reality, we think, I might be wrong, is that the grid is running on 29 technology at the edge. And as houses become smart, the grid edge becomes smart. How do we get the utilities to say, well, look, we're doing fine economically. What are the switching costs? Why should we switch to a new grid edge where the grid edge is completely automated, where SCADA now is interacting with other automated technologies? How do we get past that public-private relationship? And I'm doing great. Why should I switch quarterbacks?
So I like to look at our friends in the telecom industry. I wonder if AT&T, Ma Bell would feel the same as that world. If they'd have just sat there and said, we're going to keep the public switch telephone network with twisted pair of copper cables. We're just going to sit on our ass and just milk it dry. Look what happened. Somebody came in, they didn't supplant that system. They built on top of it. It's called the internet. So then you got everything going. And so the underlying system's still there. But if those guys don't want to keep up, somebody's going to come in and just build on top of their bones, just like old dinosaurs just walked on top of little dinosaurs. And now the asteroid came and then we're all walking on top of them. So you build on what came before you. If they want to be part of the game, that's good. I want the utilities to be, because I know them all personally. So there's a personal angle there, but that was a great contributor to civilization in the 20th century. But canals were a great part of the northeastern US before railroads came around. But now nobody talks about canals anymore, except I think Llewelyn can go hiking on the C&O Canal there in DC. But, the technology will just build on top of you and replace you. So that would be my punchy answer, John, is look at the telephone industry. If you don't beat them, you don't get to join them. They're going to crawl on top of your back and build on top. So I think that's where the new networks from the edge are going to be. They're going to grow into the middle. If they want to, if that middle is up and if you can connect with the middle because it's maintained the technology and it has improved, you hear about the utilities want to do grid modernization. That's kind of the catchword of the day. And, you know, if it's truly an improvement, I'm all for it. But if it's just an excuse to go in and puff up the rate base and, you know, create good dividends for your shareholders, I'm not really into that. I think it's got to be additive to.
Yeah.
Pat, can you tell us what storage technologies you're working with?
We're just doing, I'm Llewelyn, I'm looking for what's most cost effective in the market. Right now, that's lithium ion. But we're going to trade shows now. Thank God we can go to those things again. And you know, we've got a couple of guys on our team who really, their job is to be in charge of figuring out what's next so that we can do it. I'm for what the Texas market is paying for right now, the short duration batteries look to be, again, lithium ion is king of that space. That seems to be, it's hard to beat. It's like silicon, it's like PV silicon would be for solar up to recently.
How big are your batteries, each unit? How big is each unit?
10 megawatt hours.
And what's the drawdown time?
1 hour. So I've got a 10 megawatt capacity times 1 hour. So I could do 5 megawatts over 2 hours, but you know, the economics, now the PUC may well change that. I've of course been very attuned to what they're talking about publicly and privately. If they change the dynamics in the Texas market such that revenues will flow to a longer duration battery, then I've got a little more headroom to invest in a more expensive battery because I know I'll make my money back. But right now, a 2 hour battery at most would be effective. But, you know, like I said, this is probably the biggest relook at market design and incentives in Texas since I was here 25 years ago. So that could change. But to answer your question, we're lithium ion right now. We're looking at kind of shorter duration battery.
So where are your batteries manufactured?
China and Korea, and some assembly in the Western US.
Pat, real quick, a fire hose of answers, perhaps. How is it possible that PG&E is going to go bankrupt again? Tell us a little bit of your thoughts on the CCAs. Many cities want to own their own wires and their own. What's eventually going to happen here? Is competition coming back? Is the co-ops and the munis going to get all absorbed by the IOUs? What's going to win here? How does the market get totally innovative and competitive and aggressive?
Okay, so PG&E, I hope not, because I was there for the first bankruptcy, at least the one in 2000 and 2001. My good friend Nora Brownell was chairman of the board, kind of coming through the last bankruptcy. So I talked to her, you know, every week. So she, you know, she was worn out. She looks great now, though, for those of y'all that know and love Nora. The CCA, so I hope not a third one, but the state law there is it's that strict liability standard that just doesn't exist elsewhere in the US, makes them particularly vulnerable because they're a big deep pocket of last resort. And I hope not. My good friend Bob Flexon, who was the former CEO of Dynegy, is now chairman of that board of directors. He took over from Nora. And he's one of the smartest and most creative and savvy guys I know. So I think if anybody can help him from a board angle get through, it's Flexon. He's a good egg. And I really like the new gal they hired to run. I don't remember her name, who they hired from Michigan or Wisconsin to come run the new PG&E. But, you know, that is such a seminal utility. I mean, say what you want about California, but a lot of the creativity on all the stuff we are living through now started in PG&E, even more than Edison or San Diego. PG&E's just been right there at the forefront. They serve such a cranky base of people, from the most right-wing Californians to the most left-wing, and yet they managed to kind of stay in the mix. CCAs, I mean, we saw a version of this when I was at FERC, when Boulder was trying to kind of secede from Excel or Public Service Colorado. You know, those are hard to do. Municipalizations of utilities are harder. The CCA concept, however, seems to be a bit different. So they leave the wires with PG, as I explained, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but
Yep.
they keep the wires with PG&E, but they take over the retail procurement.
Yep.
So it looks a lot it looks kind of like a muni aggregation play in Ohio or Illinois. So, you know, the big issue there is as a person who's in the supply side now is, are they credit worthy? I mean, what kind of credit worthiness do I need to supply the Marin County CCA?
Mhm.
You know, they're going to look for my credit worthiness. I'm going to look at theirs because, as we know, in California, pretty much in Texas now too, things can really go crosswise real quick, and you got to be able to financially survive that. So the last question was, I didn't write it fast enough. Y'all are fast.
Competition, is competition coming back full flesh?
Retail competition, I hope and pray, because I look at the disparity in Texas. What happened? The municipals and the co-ops were regulated. They got shellacked by the $9,000 price for 4 days here in Texas.
Yeah.
And those customers had no option.
Yeah.
So, and those utilities have the ability, and they do and should pass it through because they can. And so those customers are going to bear that excess billions of costs for 30 years through a securitized charge. I'm in the competitive part of Texas. My retailer was supposed to manage that. That was the whole point of what we did 25 years ago, was take the risk off the back of the regulated, the poor little, they call them ratepayer. I like to think of myself as a customer, but the ratepayer, the risk of him or for her is put 100% on their back. Well, now let's put that on the back of the people who can better manage the risk. So the NRGs, the Calpines, the Vistras, those larger people, as well as clever small people like Angie and some of the good providers in the commercial space that manage that risk on behalf of their customers, and they wore it. So those people, actually all the people in the electric power industry lost money in this thing, but they don't go back and then get to recover that back from me under some sort of charge for 30 years. I can just leave as I have.
One last quick one before these other guys jump in. Tesla applied to become a retail energy provider in Texas. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I'm already telling. So when I got my new iPhone yesterday, I'm a Tesla driver, and I also have a Tesla battery in my garage. And they've now they've updated their battery, but they've asked me when I loaded up my new phone yesterday, can we talk to all the other appliances in your house? And I thought, you little crap, I'm going to let you do it just to see what you're doing, because I would never sell them short. I want to meet them in the marketplace and beat them, but I welcome them to the marketplace because the kind of creativity they brought to my home services personally, but I think to a lot of people who are fans of their cars, I love the fact that man has got his sight set on putting man on Mars. Yeah. I told my kids after, I said there were 2 things left on my macro bucket list, and one of them just happened last month, which is ABBA's going to release their last new album. And I said I was going to wait until I died before I got some new songs from ABBA, and I'm going to see an American Walk on the Moon, American Walk on Mars. So I think Elon Musk is my best shot at that number 2. So when that's done, I'm finished, guys. I'll hopefully be joining some of y'all up there at top, but we'll see who else gets where. But I don't know. I think Musk has got a lot of creativity. He attracts great people to work there. And I was thrilled to see that business located in Texas. I think that was a real tribute to our state and hopefully to our power sector, that was an attractive place to locate. But it's a good market. I know some people outside the state don't appreciate, and I saw someone write on it yesterday, but appreciate how much private business and public-private partnerships and private individuals of means like to expect to be involved in public policy. It's not kind of dictated by the government and the labor unions or the academics and the special interests and pushed down as it is in other parts of the world. Here, everybody like us, we all expect to be part of the solution. And so we're incentivized to make those solutions work. So to see a guy like Elon Musk bring Tesla into Texas like that, he's bound to be attracted to that mindset, which is we don't really, it's not that we're Republican or conservative or red or whatever colors you want to put on it. It's that we just kind of like that entrepreneurial creativity, in that we don't think that just because you're in business, you're evil. We actually like the solutions to come from business.
One last one, cryptocurrencies. They're welcome in Texas. We want them. Cryptocurrencies are a new load aggregation customer type with the electrification of vehicles and cryptocurrency growing like crazy. The 80 gigawatt ERCOT market will probably grow to 160 gigawatts. What are your thoughts?
Well, cryptocurrency, I tell you what, when I look at what inflation's about ready to do to the almighty dollar, crypto might look pretty stable. I mean, it's after that El Salvador thing a couple weeks ago, it looked like Bitcoin was, but like any other commodity, and it stabilizes. It finds its right level and goes there. So I think crypto would be a pretty interesting marriage with energy, because I think you can it just, when you link the bits and you were talking earlier about the importance of how much data is going to be part of this business.
Yep.
It already is. I mean, I've got a team down the hall right here, starting with the data scientists and on to my data guys. It is all about data. And there is so damn much data. I mean, you think how much single data is coming out of this. Multiply that times all the stuff in your house, times all the businesses in Dallas and Texas and US. It's just unbelievable. It's too much. So you have to have some ability to filter it down and utilize it. But if you can link that to the way you pay for it and you energize commerce, that again, you take the old system, the phone network, and you build something on top. You don't kick it out and replace it. You just kind of slowly over time supplant it. And I think, I'm not going to go out so far as to say I think that the cryptocurrency or currencies will supplant the US dollar, but I sure as hell see them right now building on top of it, just like I'm doing with storage network and the internet guys did on top of the AT&T network. So let them all come. We like everybody sitting around the table, and whoever's got the best idea gets the first cigar.
Absolutely. Guys?
Pat, I'd like to ask you a question. And that is, as these high-tech companies pour into Texas, are they not going to put particular strain on the electric supply? I was talking to David Naylor at Rayburn, which is a small, near you in near Dallas, a small rural electric cooperative. And he said they are having difficulty, he said, getting a seat at the table to buy because they're being outbid for power by the data mining companies, etc. Do you see that as a problem? Have you heard that before?
I've not heard that scenario from Rayburn before, but I can see that it would happen. The influx to Texas has been really choppy, but pretty abrupt. And I don't know. Again, I'm just picking this up from just reading the papers when I see about corporate tax breaks that certain counties are approving. And then friends who are in commercial real estate that are doing really big constructions that they weren't expecting. I mean, maybe COVID got everybody to kind of rethink, where do I really want to live, and where do I really want kind of things to be done? I know that kind of data comes out later in the day, but the little early canaries I see flying out of the mine are all pretty big on a lot going on here in this state. And my big worry was that the February outage would have put a pall on that and made people think, oh, Texas isn't going to be reliable. So we do have to get our reputation back on electricity. I don't like hearing that somebody can't get access to an electric supply arrangement, however. Because again, like we talked about earlier, electricity is so fundamental.
Electricity is everything. You've been a big advocate, and you mentioned it in the program earlier, of retail and retail competition. One of the things that happened in the UK, which is unraveling, is retail in the crisis they have, is the retail, something like 40 retailers. When the Thatcher government privatized the electric system, took it from the Central Electricity Generating Board and sold it off, they encouraged retailers, which often consisted of a couple of guys and a computer, and they've all gone broke because there is no electricity or no electricity at a price in which they can get a markup. Do you see any danger of that in Texas, for example?
You know, and this ties back to the this is the one time the regulators say there's an obligation. If you have an obligation to serve, that's the difference between the old world, where they did have that obligation, and the new world where you don't. So all the big retailers in Texas are not obliged to be in business. That's just not what we do. And the British model is really, I would say, of all the models in the world, that when we looked at it, that's the one we copied the most clearly. Not exactly, but I would say 75% of what we have in Texas was based on the Thatcher era British model of retail competition. And I haven't actually had cause to worry about that, Llewelyn, but I think that's a valid consideration to always keep.
I was on the telephone to London last week quite a lot, and that's what I learned, that I think between 30 and 40 out of 70 retailers had gone out of business, and their obligation was picked up by others. But the twist was, if they had promised you a very cheap rate, the people picking up had to honor the very cheap rate, which they're not deeply happy about. It's something they never anticipated.
Well, now I would call that's really fixable. That's a customer protection issue. You cut that off before they ever come in. And and we set really low standards of entry in the 99 bill, or 99 implementing regs for retailers to come to Texas. We put that standard kind of low, and the commission since then have had good cause to raise those barriers for both operational background and then financial backing for your retailers, because you want to have the small ones, because that's where your creativity and your price pressure comes, but not at an unlimited price. And that unlimited price is that you have this kind of instability that you talk about in the market, where you got people who are undercapitalized and basically overpromise and not only underdeliver, but just don't deliver. There's always a problem for that. I think that could even happen, as we saw with regulated utilities. I mean, we had regulated utilities. One of them went bankrupt right off the bat, and I think Rayburn did as well. I'm talking about Brazos. So
Nebraska did, Rayburn didn't.
Good. I know they were close, but they paid up their bill at ERCOT, or they were able to use the financing tools from the legislature.
And they're going to charge their customers over time, as most of them are. Do you think there's an obligation to serve on the part of the gas suppliers to the electric industry in Texas? There's an obligation for the utilities to serve, but there's no obligation for the gas supplier to serve, which is an awkward nexus, perhaps.
It actually, Llewelyn, as ever, you're very well read and understand it, but the nexus between the largely unregulated gas industry in Texas and the differently regulated power industry in Texas is a very obscure boundary. And I think that was the result. That was the root of the 2011 outages. It was the root of these outages in 2021, where the handoff there is not clear. You've got a lot of opacity, non-transparent markets interfacing there. The power market's set every 5 minutes with open outcry price across the state. This was a 3-day holiday weekend, and the gas markets weren't open from Friday on. So I mean, you do have inter-hour trading, of course, and that goes on, but it's not near it. They're two very different markets, and I've regulated both in my career. And my dream scenario would be to have a single regulatory kind of, again, one that's largely market driven over both, but consistent. I have heard that the dependability of a contract with an interstate pipeline, a FERC regulated pipeline, and again, we've got plenty of those going through Texas as well, that getting gas off of one of those was pretty predictable and was good. It was something that if they said it was firm and it was there. The intrastates, not so much. The ones that are regulated by the Railroad Commission. And so I think getting that nexus down better is absolutely going to happen. Getting it down to the level that we really deserve and ought to have, I think it's going to be hard to achieve. So that fallback answer is you got to get it in your contract. So the contract between the pipeline and the power plant has got to look really tight. And I'm talking about a force majeure clause that, only the Pope can probably validate. I mean, it's got to be one where, nope, no force majeure. Nope. I don't care if it got to 2 degrees below zero. You got to flow the gas. So where there is a strong obligation on a party that can do something about it, which a gas processor, a pipeline, and a gas producer, all those people that sign those contracts, they need to all be standing up behind it, just like the power plant is to the ERCOT market. Because ERCOT didn't take no for an answer. I mean, they ended up having to go to the legislature to, make whole some people. But I'll tell you, that won't happen again because this collateral standards to play in the ERCOT market just went up. So as a storage provider, I've got to put a lot of Mr. Hunt's money down as collateral. If I go AWOL, they get the money and they don't look back. We don't have that on the gas side. And so that kind of level of you're on the hook and you're accountable and you got to deliver, that needs to go all the way back. And we're not there. I think we're understanding that that's where we need to go. So at least people understand what the solution starts to look like. I think before February, people had kind of forgotten what we learned in 2011. I had. Just thinking, you always think, oh, that's just a one-off. That'll never happen again. And that was only for a couple of hours back in 2011. And now everybody's kind of forgotten about it. This was for 4 days and 200 people died. We will never forget about that. So these changes are there. We know what we need to do. It's now at the stage where we've got to find the wherewithal and the will and the guts to get it all the way through.
Thank you.
John, any final questions?
Well, I'll just say this. Pat wants to go to the moon, walk on the moon.
Mars,
and Llewelyn is in Bruce. I just say this. Let's go to Lukenbach, Texas. Chillin', whalin', and the boys. Cause this successful life we're living got us feeding like the Hatfield and the toys. Let me tell y'all something. Between Hank Williams' train song, Dear Rain song, and Blue Eyes crying in the rain. Back in Lukenbach, Texas, ain't nobody feeling no pain. All right, so Pat, I just want to remind you of your roots over there, and I'm a Southern Louisiana boy, and over there in Beaumont, where y'all are on y'all's way from Louisiana.
Port Arthur,
same thing here. Once you get past Lake Charles, it's all the same. Port Arthur folks, we said, well, they were on the way to Houston and broke down and ended up staying there.
That's what it was. You know it. I love it because John, your accent, you talk like everybody I grew up with. That is the best part of this program. I love Llewelyn. His accent's where we all came from, and Andres is where we're all going. But John, yours is where I'm from. So I love it, man.
Absolutely.
Good to be with you guys.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much.
Wonderful to be with you, Pat.
Hold on, Pat, when we get off.
Pat's going to take a picture.
I want to remember this. This was fun.
You guys, you're going to get a link for the video.
I'm good. I can watch it again. All right. All right. Thanks for including me.
Are we through recording?
We're going to stop recording now.